Good.
One moment. And
Sounds
the
good.
meeting's now live on YouTube. Shar, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. Welcome everyone to the Identity Special Interest Group for February 22nd, 2024. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Shar Howland, and I'm a co-moderator of this group with Tim Spring and Vipin Barthan. And today we will go over our working group status updates and hear a presentation from Daniela Barbosa titled 2024, The State of the Ledger. So really looking forward to that. This is a Linux Foundation call, so we are following the antitrust policy. This is also a Hyperledger Foundation call, so we are following the Hyperledger Code of Conduct, which are both written and linked here. Let's see, and the call is, of course, being recorded. It's also being live streamed to YouTube, and we will post the recording on the meeting page later today, right here. And if anyone would like to put their name on the attendees list, that would be wonderful. Let's see, it looks like we have some new faces on the call today. Would anyone like to hop off mute and introduce themselves, say as much or as little as you want about what you're working on and why you're joining us today? And yeah, we're so glad to have everyone here and would love to hear about what people are working on and interested in. Yes.
Thank you, Char. My name is Dino Delaccio. I'm the Chief Information Officer at the United Nations Pension Fund. I'm based in New York. I've been following not very frequently, however, the activities of the Hyperledger, specifically on digital identity. Here at the pension fund, we implemented a digital identity solution for proof of existence using Hyperledger Indy. And we are now extending the scope of that solution to include a digital identity for all the UN staff members. So we are piloting this extension. I got in touch with Thomas Sidey. Previously, we met in London last year at a blockchain event. So my presence here is to keep myself up to date with any advancement, any addition that are being made in this domain, specifically by Hyperledger. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Dino. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves? Yes, Michael, go ahead.
Yes, I'm Michael Almack with the Small Business Administration here in Kansas, and been interested in Hyperledger personally, but I also work with tech entrepreneurs here. And this is one of the topics I'd like to become more aware of. So I'm here for informational use only.
Great. We're glad you're here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to introduce themselves?
Hi, this is Marvin Van Tugen. I've been part of the Hyperledger financial markets mortgage subgroup for the past year now. Now starting to see what I can do to tie in, at least from the financial markets, what some of the other special interest groups are doing, and always interested to find out what's going on within Hyperledger. So appreciate you guys holding these meetings.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, Marvin. Any other introductions anyone would like to make? All right. Well, we've got a great group today. Sean, how about I hand it over to you for the announcements you've added in?
Absolutely. Thank you, Shar. And just a couple of quick announcements. In April, Internet Identity Workshop is happening. It is a twice a year gathering of the clans in the identity community, folks who work on OpenID Connect, who work on decentralized identity, who work on tons of different aspects of this topic are going to be there in Mountain View, California. I would love if in this meeting, maybe in the next couple of sessions, we could talk about what are the topics that the Identity SIG wants to talk about at IIW. Let's get a little organized and maybe plan some sessions and things we want to talk about there. Number two, in a couple of weeks, the Open Wallet Foundation will have their 1-year anniversary Zoom. It's happening Thursday, March 14th, 2024 at 9 a.m. Pacific. It's going to be about an hour. We're going to talk about what's happened in the last year of the Open Wallet Foundation and where we're going next. So that should be a lot of fun. And the last two, we have, and this is relevant to this community, a workshop happening, Zero Knowledge Proofs and ZK Programming and Blockchain Application Development. And because I was moving fast, I didn't actually put in the date. I will incorporate the date into this wiki page shortly. But it's going to be a great presentation. Zero Knowledge Proofs do come into play a lot in the work that's happening in the identity community, and we're pretty excited with the two folks who are putting on this workshop. And lastly, a couple of weeks ago, we had the Identity and Interop workshop. You can find the recording, the wiki, all the links at the URL there. But decentralized identity and interoperability, this workshop connected Credo, which was formerly known as Agent Framework JavaScript, with Hyperledger Besu, Cardano, Checked, Hyperledger non-creds, and OpenID Connect for VC. The DSR team, Alex and Renata, put on the workshop along with Artem, who is doing an incredible job in the chat, answering questions and helping folks out. So this is absolutely a great workshop. That team was super proud of the work they put into it. You should definitely check out both the recording and the resources on that wiki page. Thank you, Shar.
Thank you so much, Sean. Any other announcements that anyone would like to make before we jump into things? All right, time for working group updates. I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for Daniela's presentation, so I will go through our updates fairly quickly, but please stop me if you have any additional updates from working groups you're involved in, and I will give a bit longer of a pause at the end to see who else wants to jump in and give updates. So let's see, in the Indie Contributors Working Group, our Indie annual report, we received input from the community and was submitted. Newest release 1.13.0 was completed. Continuing discussions and updates, hearing updates about the Indie Besu project. This is a project of experimental research on using Besu for the internal mechanisms of Indie, and this work is happening in a separate repository under the Indie project, and it's been great to hear updates and have interesting discussions on the call about it. Let's see, in the Aries working group call, they are working on AIP 2.0 updates, credential protocol reversions, and their annual report as well. Let's see, in the Aries bifold user group, they are putting forward a project proposal to the Open Wallet Foundation. There's a draft under review. They're also working on dependency injection. Clasio with BCGov, who has presented on our call before, is working on that. In the Aries Cloud Agent Python user group, lots of status updates related to, let's see, the new release candidate of 0.12.0, a non-creds RS and upgrading an Acopi deployment to a non-creds RS, did peer and AFJ interop, load generator testing, a non-creds in W3C format, discussions as well for an Acopi 1.0.0 release, and a discussion of the Hyperledger mentorship program and a call for mentors. So lots going on there. Tim Bloomfield.
Sorry, just a really quick note on bifold. So Open Wallet Foundation, they were accepted in the Open Wallet Foundation.
Oh, great.
You can now see them on Discord there, and I think the GitHub repo will be moved soon.
Sounds great. Thank you for that update.
Oh.
Awesome. Let's see, the Aries Cloud Agent Python maintainers meeting, we're continuing to meet, met last week as well, but no notes from that meeting, just working through PRs and figuring out what needs to be done to merge them in. And then as well on Hyperledger non-creds, discussions about a non-creds in W3C format, 0.2.0 release, the 1.1.0.0 release as well, and V2 of zero knowledge proof capabilities. So super quick overview of the Hyperledger working groups. Does anyone have anything to add on what I've covered so far? All right, moving on to the Trust Over IP Foundation. The all members meeting was yesterday. They had a presentation from the Content Authenticity Initiative at Adobe. We actually had Eric Schouten, who presented yesterday on the all members meeting. He presented on our call several months ago. Let's see, as well in the communications committee, I wasn't able to find more recent info from them, but if anyone knows differently, that they've been meeting more regularly, feel free to jump in. On the governance stack working group, they've been working on the issuer requirements guide, bunch of different work items there. They're working on the third generation TOIP stack diagrams. So if anyone else has additional info to add to that, that would be great. Lots of task forces under the technology stack working group as well. The technology architecture, trust registry, trust spanning protocol, ACDC, AI and metaverse, credential exchange protocols, and DidWebS task force. I won't go into too much detail about all of those because they are all linked here if you want more information. And let's see, in the ecosystem foundry working group, they are working on an ecosystem components and use cases document and discussing that alignment with the business model canvas and accompanying instruction book. And let's see, concepts and terminology as well met last week. They're working on the terminology engine V2, as well as the spec up coding project. All right, so that was again pretty quick through the TOIP updates. Yes, jump in, Lynn.
TOIP really quick. The TOIP is reviewing its GitHub sorry, all the projects that are the repos that it has in GitHub, and archiving a bunch of them that haven't been used. Just because they're archived doesn't mean that you won't still have access to the resources and things out there, but and they can unarchive at any time, but they're going through a little process of making that happen. Just so I'd throw that out there.
Absolutely. Thanks for that update. That's great. All right. And the Decentralized Identity Foundation, the DIDCOM spec working group, they met on the first Monday of the month. And they've been talking about a DIDCOM branding reprise and DIDCOM at the IETF. And then the users group is what meets on the second, third, and fourth Mondays of the month after that initial spec working group meeting every month. I wasn't able to find meeting notes from their more recent meetings, but if anyone on this call knows what they have been up to and working on, please jump in. Let's see. The diff interoperability group as well wasn't able to find documentation on what they've been doing, but the IoT special interest group seems to be meeting regularly and discussing and organizing for work items under that SIG. And as well, in the W3C standard community credentials group had recent CCG traceability call and verifiable credentials for education task force calls. Does anyone on this call have any additional updates about any work items happening in the diff or W3C that they would like to share with us? And if there are any other general working group updates or announcements anyone would like to give, now would be a great time as well. All right. With that, I will hand it over to you, Daniela, for your presentation. And it looks like you're on mute.
First time on Zoom. All right, let me just share my screen. I have a lot of slides. And when Shar asked me if I would be interested in coming to do a presentation at the special interest group, I said absolutely. One of the things I actually do, and I know I'm not very often am able to attend live, but this is one of the special interest groups that I attend or I watch on the recording, because I think it is one of the best resources out there across what's happening in the identity space. So, first I want to thank everyone who participates, who contributes, who does the hard work of going across all these organizations at the Linux Foundation and outside of the Linux Foundation to really, bring together a very, consistent and, great summary of what's happening in the ecosystem. So, Vipin, Shar, Tim, and the rest of you, thank you so much, because I do think it really helps the ecosystem. And one of the things, very often people come to us, right? They want to understand what's happening in the identity space. And one of the first things I do is I send them over to the special interest group, and I ask them to take a look at the meeting notes and all the great links. So thank you for everything. So thank you for inviting me to come and speak at the special interest group. What I'm going to do today is a combination of giving an overview about what the Hyperledger Foundation is and what we've been doing. We just celebrated our 8th year anniversary. We had a webinar last week, really, talking about what's happening in the ecosystem. But 8 years in the blockchain space and, in the digital identity space as well, sometimes feels like a lifetime. Many, many years. And we know these technologies will take a long time to get adopted, but we're seeing so much great adoption across the board. And what I want to do today is, because the folks on the phone are obviously very close to the identity space, it really spend some time talking about the rest of the foundation and how the identity projects and yourselves fit in together. And sometimes we spend a lot of time individually as developers, as business leaders, kind of focused on the things that we are working on, the customers that we have to support, the end users that we have to support, the technology innovation that we're trying to bring to market, that it's hard to see what else is happening around the community. And the Hyperledger Foundation continues to grow so much in regards to number of projects, number of communities that address, that I thought hopefully it would be better, to just give you an overview of that. In 2021, when we rebranded the Hyperledger project, that was this called, and I'll talk a little bit about the history, to the Hyperledger Foundation. One of the things that we came up with, it was, a tagline of building better together, which is essentially what open source is, right? Is how do we collaborate? How do we work together to build something that's better for the ecosystem, for the industry, and essentially for the users? And how do we work together to accelerate that? How do we work across standard organizations and open source code organizations? And really, the Hyperledger Foundation, its goal is, with our members and our community and all the open source projects, is to do that. Very importantly, and some of you maybe, don't know the history of the Hyperledger Foundation and the Linux Foundation. The Linux Foundation, for the last 25 plus years, has really been the home for the most important, what I would say the most important open source projects. Obviously, the Linux kernel, which is our namesake, but we have some of the largest open source projects, for example, the cloud native computing where Kubernetes sits. And we also have the most interesting, from an industry perspective, I also like to point out the Academy Software Foundation, right, which is where the film industry is coming together to build open source code and projects that then they can focus as film industry leaders in building the best film experience for all of us. And, I know many of you, I'm sure, love to watch films. So the Linux Foundation is really a very large organization. Today, we have close to 600 different open source projects that sit under that umbrella. Really, anything that you touch today from a technology perspective, if you take a look at the source code and see, some of the licensing, it probably has Linux Foundation open source code in it as well, from your car in the automotive grade Linux to obviously, infrastructure. And certainly in the identity space, the aim is to, have a lot of the projects that we have here. We are also, a multi-party foundation. So as I mentioned, there's 600 different foundations at the Linux Foundation umbrella. Hyperledger Foundation is one of the largest ones that we have that has, the most members, the most projects, and the most active community as well. But some of the other ones, which, I call the digital trust umbrella that you see here, are organizations that many of you are quite aware of. And once again, as part of the SIG, you get updates on things like the diff or the trust over IP and open wallet as well. And the goal is to, make sure that we're collaborating across these projects and really, once again, building better together, even, across the Linux Foundation. And we're happy to talk about that. Drilling in specifically on the Hyperledger Foundation, what our structure is, we have the foundation itself. So the entity that is the Hyperledger Foundation, that sits under the Linux Foundation. We have our member community, those that fund the foundation, that help us support and resource all the things that we do, down to the code and the tooling that is needed for the contributors and the maintainers in order to be participating in those code projects, to the special interest groups, to the webinars and the meetups. And this is funded by our member organizations. So for those of you who are on the phone that are a part of our member organizations, we thank you for your contributions and your support of the foundation. Really, without our members, we couldn't do what we do. And we are a global community. People from all walks and all regions of the world support and contribute. For example, our meetup community, we have over 100,000 meetup members. So, our new logo that we launched this summer is really about those three pillars: the foundation, the member organizations that help support this, and our global community, which many of you are part of. Or actually, if you're on the call today, you are already part of our global community. So thank you for your contributions. When I think about the Hyperledger Foundation and kind of as staff, and just to let everybody know, this is always blows people's mind. We are a really small team. We have about 7 full-time people worldwide supporting the Hyperledger Foundation, supporting all our projects, supporting all our special interest groups, supporting our members, supporting everything that we do in the market. So it's about what the members and the individuals like you do that really help create what we produce at the foundation. So first, we are a developer community. We're very focused on the maintainers, the contributors down at that level. And making sure that they have the tools and the resources that they need to be successful. We do a lot of education and training, education at that 100,000-foot level. For example, our Introduction to Blockchain courses that we started publishing in 2017 and continuously update have close to 300,000 people that have gone through that course. I very often am out at events or conferences and people will come up to me and say, hey, I was introduced to blockchain thanks to Hyperledger's, intro to blockchain courses. And we continue doing that. We have some great courses already, around self-sovereign identity, for example, on edX that you can take. We have Aries developer courses, and those continue getting updated and rolled out as well. And we do a lot of tutorials and a lot of sessions like this. Sean, on the introduction today, talked a bit about the workshops that we do. We support those kind of trainings to get the developers and the business leaders in the ecosystem understanding blockchain and our digital identity projects here at the foundation. And last but not least, we make sure that there's a healthy commercial ecosystem. You can have the best code and the best developers and the best tools for those developers to do what they need to do and be successful, but you have to have a vendor ecosystem and a healthy commercial ecosystem to support these technologies in the market. So these are really like the three pillars of what I say, our staff is really focused on as well. One thing that is important, I think, to just go back to is the governance structure of the foundation, right? How does the Hyperledger Foundation function? So we have a governing board, and the governing board is made up of our premier members, as well as 2 general member representatives that get voted to the governing board. And the governing board essentially is responsible for the operations, the day-to-day operations of the foundation, things like special interest groups and marketing committee. But very importantly, the Technical Oversight Council, or the TOC, is really the foundation for all technical decisions. Our members, our governing board, do not overlap with what is done in the Technical Oversight Committee around the technical communities, so the projects themselves and the working groups and task forces as well. And it's important to keep those two things separate. And over the last 8 years, we've had charter changes and things that help a community like Hyperledger, which started as one project, really expand out. So feel free to read the full charter. And I will make this presentation available once this presentation is over. There is no doubt that open source has essentially won the game when it comes to decentralized technologies. And there really is not a lot of proprietary software in the space at that plumbing level, right? There certainly is a lot of proprietary software at the application level, but open source essentially is essential for decentralized technologies, as we've seen over the last few years. And the foundation, and here in Hyperledger, what we believe is, it's open source, but it's also open development and open governance. And the difference very much is you can have open source and you can, put your open source with an open source license on your GitHub, and you can have people, basically take a look at it and use it. But can the users and the individuals and the companies that want to use that code really have influence on the development and the governance of that? So it's really important for us at the foundation that we believe and we are focused on, open source with open development and open governance. And very often we talk to organizations, whether it's big banks or, even like government agencies, that really understand the difference and really appreciate what we do under the Linux Foundation and under the Hyperledger Foundation when it comes to open source and open governance as well. From a Hyperledger perspective, I mentioned before, we've launched 8 years ago. We just are celebrating our 8th year anniversary. We have, multiple graduated projects, and I'll talk a little bit about that. We have a very active Hyperledger Labs ecosystem where innovation is happening. And we continue to really grow from a global perspective in the individuals participating, in the individuals contributing, and obviously in the global organizations that are supporting our community as well. And we're very diverse, which sometimes makes it very hard because it's very noisy. There's so much going on all the time around industry-specific views or project views. And, it's important as a foundation to be able to support that at the umbrella level and really give spaces for communities like the Identity Special Interest Group to be able to kind of lead in the expertise, lead in the things that they need as well. So we're very grateful, not just for the identity community, but for the other ones that are also. So, since 2015, we have really been shaping, the market with frameworks and tools. And a lot of the words that people use to describe what we do here in our foundation and our communities, that we're open, that we're global, and that we're trusted. And this is really important in technologies that become critical to infrastructure, right? If you're going to use open source technologies or any sort of technologies, you want to make sure that it's trusted, something that you're going to build long-term or infrastructure for, that it's something that you can rely on. From a community perspective, we continue to grow and be very active. And these are just some code-related numbers, and we do track these year over year. We just put these data points together for our 8th year anniversary. I mentioned the labs before. If you are interested in kind of seeing some of the newest projects that are happening or labs that are happening, there's a lot of great resources for you to do that. And there's a couple in the identity space as well, including one of the recent one, which is the Open Enterprise Agent. But the projects are a place, the labs are a place for, the projects to actually come from. So we have a couple of projects in our active project portfolio today that have come from the labs. So if you have interesting code projects that you're working on that you want to, build an enterprise developer community around, encourage you to take a look at the labs and potentially look at contributing to our lab ecosystem as well. We are global, but we're also very local as well. So the meetup community, for example, now has over 100,000 participants and growing. We've had over 1,400 meetups in our lifetime in the last 8 years. Last year alone, we had 70 meetups, 70 virtual meetups and 12 in-person meetups. And it's fantastic to see post-COVID our in-person meetups picking up again. And I hope that in 2024, not only will I get to see many of you in person, that we'll do more of those in-person meetups as well. And we continue to, last year we had seven different languages that we're supporting from our global community and 6 different regional chapters. I'll give you an example. One of the growth that we see regionally, we see it in Latin America, we see it in Brazil, for example, with the Brazilian regional meetup, but our India regional meetup continues to grow. They had a 20% increase from the previous year, close to 18,000, I think over 18,000 participants now throughout all of India. And it's a great developer ecosystem. And I know we've actually been talking about getting the special interest group potentially to have a version that is from a time perspective friendly into the India region as well. A couple other, by the numbers, you could take a look at these, but like as I mentioned, we continue to grow and continue to, to support these communities, which take a lot of resources in helping to support that as well. And our projects, and I'll talk a little bit about, you might say, well, what happened to this project and where did this one go? And the lifetime of Hyperledger, we've had 21 different projects, and today we have 7 graduated and 6 incubated projects. And it's important to understand what that means, because having that project lifecycle, and this is something that we've curated and really spent a lot of time over the last 2 years, I would say, that's a technical oversight committee and all the work that they've done in supporting that healthy enterprise-grade project lifecycle, because it's important, once again, when people pick up code, whether they do it in labs or whether they do it in a graduated project, that they understand that here at the Hyperledger Foundation, that code has governance, that has a project lifecycle, that has the tools and resources needed for it to, once again, be that long-term code project that you can support, that you can bring into your applications, that you can bring into your government applications and know that it's going to be long time standing as well. So here is our project timeline from 2015 to 2023. And I can spend hours and hours kind of going through this. And it's really important to understand that what we've done in the last 8 years has really been what the enterprise, and when I talk about the enterprise, it's corporate companies, but also government agencies, for example, and startups. But what we've really have met is the enterprise need around blockchain and digital identity. These are really important to understand because, some projects might go away, some projects, get archived, but overall, it is what the enterprise needs, right? It is what the developer community brings to the market and what the developer ecosystem through collaboration brings once again and builds better together as well. So starting obviously in the beginning of our project lifecycle, when we were the Hyperledger project, it was about permission ledgers. Hyperledger Fabric being the first DLT that came into the project. And then by 2017, we had Hyperledger Indy addressing digital identity needs in the marketplace. We had Hyperledger Burrow, which was our first Ethereum virtual machine project. And we had Hyperledger Quilt that was focused on interoperability technology, very early on, we knew it was going to be networks of networks. So it wasn't going to be one network to rule them all. And even though maybe people were working in silos in these DLT platforms, that they were going to have to address interoperability. So very early on, we realized that. And as we continue to grow, things like tooling. So by 2021 and even in early 2020, really understanding the requirements for tooling in the enterprise, right? How do we get enterprises to quickly build these networks and deploy these solutions into the marketplace? So things like Firefly and Bevel. So it's really a project timeline that meets the needs of the enterprise. And today our projects, once again, and you'll see, a lot of the logos are kind of, if you go from here to here, they kind of dropped off. And it's important, once again, to have that project lifecycle to understand what the enterprise needs. And very importantly, where the developers want to spend their time, right? You want to make sure that you have projects that can grow that developer ecosystem, that can bring new maintainers into the fold and bring users into the fold as well. So we're very proud about our active projects, and we're also very proud about the projects that got us here. And for example, on our blog, you can see we do Blockchain Pioneers blog posts, really highlighting the innovation that has happened in Hyperledger over the last few years. So when we think about our project portfolio, we have distributed ledgers, we have libraries, and we have tool. And it's really, once again, making sure that from a project lifecycle, as things come, and are incubating or in labs or incubating and then graduated, that we have a way to make sure that when people pick up code that comes from the Hyperledger Foundation, they understand that, they understand the communities behind it, and they understand how to get involved, how to contribute, and why, very importantly, it's important to contribute. You want to be a member of these projects. You want to contribute code. You want to, report bugs. Everything is really, focused on creating those healthy ecosystems on the project. And this is our graduated projects, and there's lots of other sessions that we have on focusing on what the life cycle of the projects are. If you want to understand that, everything's very well documented, and I would encourage you to do that. So just very quickly, I'm going to go through these next few slides just very quickly. Just thinking about the history of Hyperledger and where we are and what we have. Hyperledger Fabric continues to be one of the preferred solutions. This was a report from late 2022 where the top 100 companies were asked about their use cases, and Fabric was selected as one of the DLTs that they're using. And you'll see others there, Ethereum, obviously a lot of the Besu views. And Fabric has an upcoming 3.0 release with many new features that the marketplace has been asking for. And we see a lot of active projects working within what we call the Fabric ecosystem. And last year, the Fabric maintainers, working with staff and other community members, spent some time doing ecosystem mappings around where Fabric touches other projects and other code projects within the ecosystem as well. So take a look at that if you're interested. And obviously, in the identity space, there is an opportunity for us to do similar ecosystem mappings. And I know at the the technical oversight meeting today, that actually was discussed as well. So we're looking forward to doing that. And back to what I mentioned about implementation support and that healthy commercial ecosystem, this is just an example of Fabric, and we have slides that kind of cover other projects as well. But we have a certified service provider program that helps support that. We have blockchain as a service options, and this is really important. Once again, as these projects mature, that there is these type of vendor and support mechanisms in place for that commercial ecosystem, that there's training and certification that people can take and be certified. And we support that across all our graduated projects as well. Some examples in trade finance, and all of these, like I mentioned, I will give this deck out. It'll be presented and linked to also in the YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, where you can see the case studies in trade finance, in supply chain, digital currencies across our project portfolio. We're seeing a lot of adoption around digital currencies for peer-to-peer transactions, cross-border payments, and obviously central bank digital currencies as well. And we're seeing support across our projects from Fabric to Besu to Firefly as well. And there's a great ebook that you can download from our website that highlights across the world how Hyperledger technology technologies are being used, from things that are in research stage to things that are already in production in the central bank digital currency ecosystem. So please, if you're interested in learning more, take a look at the ebook. It's on our website under the research. It's available in English, Chinese, and Japanese as well. And it's a great resource to really understand why blockchain technology for central bank digital currencies and why open source and open development is really key to that. I think the digital identity ecosystem is going to have a lot of intersections, across CBDCs. And it's one of the things that I look forward to having this community actually work together in 2024 to really address the needs for digital wallets and identity in the central bank digital currency ecosystem. And we started obviously thinking about permission ledgers in 2017, but by 2017, 2018, we knew that it wasn't one way or another, right? Permission versus permissionless, or public versus private, and we started very early to fit the requirements of the ecosystem. And by 2017, as I mentioned before, we did already have Hyperledger Burrow from an EVM support perspective. In 2019, we had the Ethereum Foundation join Hyperledger, as well as the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. And very importantly, we had Hyperledger Besu being contributed by Consensus, the company with the Y. And today, Besu is one of the most adopted permissioned EVMs, and also a rising star in the Ethereum mainnet community. And we have a lot of other projects that are really focused on the Ethereum ecosystem as well. I'm not going to go through this once again. These slides are going to be available, but Besu is being used both as a public execution client as well as a private permissioned EVM in many use cases. And I'll highlight some of these very quickly around financial market infrastructure, projects like Finality that have 17 major shareholders really running that infrastructure, and that market infrastructure is running on Hyperledger Besu. Recently, Citi launched their Treasury and Trade Solutions, Citi Token Services, that runs on Hyperledger Besu. Things like UDPN, which is the Universal Digital Payments Network, also running on Hyperledger Besu. And it's really important from an optionality perspective and a token support of the Ethereum ecosystem. And Sean earlier on mentioned the workshop that we recently did around some of the Besu and Aries work as well, which I think is fantastic and is really of great interest to the ecosystem. And if you are not paying attention to that, I would highly recommend taking a look at that as well. One thing that I would like to point out, and I think we've seen this, and we saw this very early on with the Sovereign network, right? The Sovereign was one of the first public permission networks out there, runs on Hyperledger Indy, and we're seeing these public permission networks expanding throughout the world. Things like EPSI, with the European blockchain services in Europe, LACchain, which is part of the Inter-American Development Bank, and Rede Blockchain Brazil, which is part of the Brazilian Development Bank. These are general purpose infrastructures that have, once again, public permission networks as core to what they're delivering. They're delivering a layer one public infrastructure to these regions and to these use cases. And just very quickly, this is something a lot of people don't know, and I like to highlight. This is actually a recent report by Blockdaemon, but the adoption trends of Hyperledger Besu continue to grow around specifically banks and financial services as well. So encourage you to take a look at that report. And as I mentioned before, Besu is running as an execution client. So around 13% of mainnet, so the Ethereum mainnet, about 13% of mainnet run Hyperledger Besu as an execution client. The numbers might be higher because these numbers are updated manually, but it's very important for the Ethereum ecosystem. Client diversity is not an option. If there is a bug in Geth, and there was a recent bug in Nethermind, and that created a lot of questions, and people kind of jumping in and saying that client diversity is a requirement. And we've been working with that Besu community for a while to make sure that Besu is well positioned to be taking. And we've actually seen some stake validators move to 100% Besu support, which is great to see as well. So really important that Besu is a critical part of it. Talked about interoperability and some of the projects that we have. Really important as these networks go into production and as these networks of networks continue to have to interoperate, and companies and organizations have to basically participate in multiple networks. And we've always said that that's a need as well. And Hyperledger Cacti is one of the projects. It's a graduated project, just graduated in the October timeframe of last year. That really is becoming sort of a core project to address interoperability with enterprise blockchains, both in the public and the permission side as well. All right, I'm going to skip this one. This is just a couple use cases if you want to take a look at it. Another project that came in that really is addressing the needs of the enterprise today. This one came in 2020, just graduated, went into graduated status also in October of 2023, is Hyperledger Firefly. And Hyperledger Firefly is really, once again, a tool for enterprises and startups and governments to leverage to really be able to minimize the amount of work that they need to run a network as well. And it supports not just Hyperledger DLTs, but also many of the DLTs out there, including, R3's Corda, as well as the public blockchains like Polygon and Optimism and Avalanche. And if you think about just very quickly, why should I look at Firefly? Typically when you're building networks and applications, you kind of have to think about not just the DLT and the chains, but everything else that goes into building these applications, the messaging, the document management, the integration into your enterprise systems, the onboarding, the identity pieces of it. And Firefly is essentially helping, think of it as, I call it middleware into building those applications so that really, those end user companies and those enterprises can really focus on building the application layer. And we see a lot of use cases and a lot of support in the ecosystem throughout. For example, Swift, their CBDC sandbox uses Hyperledger Firefly to really iterate across many financial institutions in some of the projects that they have. And there's a few others that you can read on our website. So very quickly, I gave you just kind of an overview of what we're happening in the distributed ledger space, in the permission space, in the public space, in the tooling around interoperability, around tooling like Firefly and Bevel, which is helping, to deploy these networks. And obviously the identity ecosystem has been critical to the Hyperledger Foundation since the beginning, with Hyperledger Indy being accepted in 2017, and then Aries in 2019, and then Anon-Creds in 2022. And we know that the Hyperledger identity community also interacts and plays with other projects as well, but it's great to see. So, when we talk about the Hyperledger identity ecosystem within our foundation, obviously Indy, Aries, and Anon-Creds are the projects that we highlight and we continue to highlight as well, and are very core, obviously, to our active projects. A couple of the use cases and what this is for is actually to ask all of you, whether you're listening or you're on the phone today, if you have use cases that are using any of the Hyperledger technologies, we need to know about them. We need to be able to tell the story. Obviously, the government of British Columbia has been fantastic, not only as being one of the main contributors to these projects, which is amazing to see. And I think, the government of British Columbia is probably one of the top governments contributing open source to the Linux Foundation, which is amazing to always see and talk about. As well. And if you haven't heard John Jordan's keynote from the Open Source Foundation, the Linux Foundation Open Source Summit last year in Vancouver, highly recommend. It's a great keynote to really talk, that talks about the commitments that the government of British Columbia does to the Linux Foundation, primarily to Hyperledger as well. But talking about use cases, I think I saw Subra on the phone before around enabling portable KYC for financial institutions, right? This is a very important use cases that people are very interested in. Talking about Indicio's proven finance around secure financial data verification. These are all use cases that if you, once again, have solutions that you've built using that we'd love to see And our use case tracker has over 200 plus use cases built with Hyperledger technologies. This goes across all our projects, not just our identity projects, of course. And I encourage you to submit your use case now, whether it is in pilot stage or in production stage. The more we can help promote those use cases and point people to the uses of the technologies across all our projects, the better suited that we are as well. And last, and like I said, there's a lot of other things in this deck that I'll make available is, many people say, well, Daniela, there's so much going on in the Hyperledger Foundation. How do I even understand what's going on from a project perspective? Last year, we spent a lot of time working with the community to launch a project matrix. So now you can go on our website and you can easily identify the different projects that are in the Hyperledger Foundation, what their purpose is, even down to what programming language they're coded in, and it's a great resource for our community to do that. And as I mentioned, we continue to grow and prune inactive projects. This is so important. Hyperledger Ursa, which I know has been really, was key to the identity ecosystem. We worked very closely with the Ursa maintainers and continue to do so to make sure that that code is, properly presented to the ecosystem or moved into pieces that we have. The work that you've seen with Hyperledger Aries and some of the Aries community moving over to the Open Wallet Foundation. This is all about having that healthy ecosystem that continues to grow, that the maintainers and the contributors go and participate and contribute to where they believe will have the most impact and the most success. And here at the Hyperledger Foundation, we're here to support that, regardless of where the developers and the maintainers end up. The goal is to have the best, the most openly developed and open governed open source projects in the world. So I'm going to pause there, and I know I have 8 minutes, and I apologize. I was going to give more time for questions, and I want to just thank everybody who's done a lot of work over the last 8 years. And I'm going to go ahead and just solve. All right. All right. And if you have any questions, feel free to Dino, I see that you have. Hi, Dino. How are you?
I'm okay. Thank you, Daniela, for the very comprehensive and detailed presentation. So my question is very practical. As I alluded to before, we went live in 2021 with a digital identity solution based on Hyperledger Indy and Aries. Has been going on very well for 3 years now. And so I definitely appreciate that maybe my position is relatively different than others. I work in an environment where the demand for assurance, compliance, it's very high. So I want to make sure that I ask a pertinent question. So you made a very good distinction saying we are a developer community. Then you also alluded to the fact that you have some sort of a certification for individual or for entity. So given what I alluded to before, and I put also in the chat, my specific focus is assurance, auditability, certification. Is there any task force within the ecosystem that you and the person before has described that specifically focus on assurance processes, certification, guidelines, best practices, whatever you name it? As I said, very specific from a practical standpoint. In order to provide assurance about the solution I designed and implemented, I had to obtain 4 different audits, 4 different independent audits, starting from the ISO 27001, which is not really a specific audit for blockchain-based solution, but it is what is available right now for at least giving some sort of a comfort about information security vis-a-vis the solution. So that's the question, whether there is any task force or there is a plan to establish a task force in this domain. Thank you.
Right. So I'm going to give you my perspective, right, as the executive director of the Hyperledger Foundation. And ultimately, these kind of programs and needs are driven by the maintainers and the users within each project community. So I gave an example of Hyperledger Fabric, right, which is a very mature, project around how, and that community came to us and said, we need certification, we need training, we need to have a certified service provider program. For Bezu right now, same thing, right? That community has, production level implementations, and they've said we now need the certification of the developers and the certification of the service providers. So one of the things that the Hyperledger Foundation and across the Linux Foundation, we do is we support the needs of the community based on the maturation of when they're needed, right? And things from like conformance programs, right? And if you look at, the Kubernetes ecosystem, and right now we're having some discussions around conformance in one of the other projects, right? How do you build these programs into it? So I'm going to pause there. And, I don't know, if someone else on the phone who's very active and, a core contributor to the community wants to answer this, but if it's something that is needed right now in the community, this is the place to bring it up, and then we can figure out how do we support that, and what does it mean, and what pieces fall under the Hyperledger Foundation that are very focused on the code, right? Which pieces might fall somewhere else within the ecosystem that's very complex, and we know that it's a very complex ecosystem as well. So if anybody else has a comment on that, please do raise your hand and speak up. Okay. Maybe this is something, a session that, I would, recommend that maybe the special interest group could schedule to kind of hash out what the requirements are, where the work is being done. We've done in the past some mappings of, I think the community has done some mappings, not we as staff, around where the work is being done, and maybe it could be helpful to do that.
Yeah, that would be interesting. So just to follow up to your comment, as a user, I establish a dynamic coalition, a working group within the United Nations on blockchain assurance standardization. It's part of the Internet Governance Forum of the UN, but it will be useful to have some sort of alignment and also some input from the Hyperledger community vis-a-vis, as you said, from a technical standpoint, from a developer standpoint, what are the elements that can go into, let's just use the term that you use, conformance. I like that as a former auditor, I like that term much better. But I think that there is a room for work and for collaboration in that area. Thank you.
Okay. Great. I'll call on Sean Bowen, who is actually on staff. He's one of our community architects that leads our and supports our digital identity projects. And Sean, if you can just make note of that and maybe, work with Shar and Vipin and Tim and the rest of the team to get that on the schedule.
Will do.
And Sean's awesome. So hi, Sean.
Thanks, Daniela.
All right. Any other questions?
I just had a quick question. I was curious about the project matrix. I can go find the link, but yeah, I was just wondering if you have a little bit more information on exactly how that works and what's the best way to use that tool.
Sure. So the project matrix is on the website, and obviously if there's updates that need to get done, and let me go ahead and so if you go to hyperledger.org, click on projects and then project matrix, and I will share the link here on the chat.
Okay.
And then you can select the different boxes on the top that you might be interested in, what compatible projects at Hyperledger, what language, what overall purpose, etc.
Yeah, awesome. That seems like a really useful tool. Thank you.
And then I'm also going to put the full deck, and this is this is a full briefing deck that I, customized a bit for today's call. These slides are view only. Feel free when you're presenting the Hyperledger Foundation or projects within your own communities or your own company, feel free to reuse these slides as well. And if you need anything else, just reach out to staff and we're happy to provide details.
Great. Thank you for sending that link, and I will add that to our meeting page as well so that that is easily accessible.
Absolutely. Reuse.
Yes, absolutely. All right, and it looks like we are just out of time. Thank you so much, Danielle, for a great presentation. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you to everyone who contributed with working group status updates today. And yeah, this was an awesome call. Really appreciate everyone joining.
Fantastic. And thanks again for all the contributions and all the work you do. I think it's really the corpus of content that this special interest group produces and contributes to the community is extremely valuable. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And for those who attended, this has been live streamed to YouTube. I'm going to go into YouTube in a little bit and add links, change the cover graphic and stuff. So if you want to share this meeting with anyone of your colleagues or folks you work with, it'll be up on YouTube and the Hyperledger YouTube channel.
Perfect. Thank you, Sean. And thanks again, Daniela. Really appreciate your time, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for your support. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.